Well, Harold came about really, I was almost sort of discovering the film in reverse. And what I mean by that is I'd spent a few years going out to Cannes to look at the markets and see what distribution was about and really try and understand that process. And it was really through that I realised horror was always a safe bet for an indie, because you don't need a named cast. You can do it relatively cheaply, and if you've got a decent idea, you've got a good chance of getting out there. So horror was definitely the way to go. Plus, I'd always been a fan of horror anyway. I grew up on horror films, so it was a natural choice really. So then it was a case of kind of narrowing it down to what kind of horror film. And the zombie film, there's thousands of them already, and I saw that as a challenge really, to sort of sit down and figure out, well, what can we bring to the zombie film that's fresh. And that was kind of the genesis of it really, the sort of the challenge of trying to come up with something original. The story is about this friendship, and how that's put at risk by this horrible disease, this zombifying disease. And actually I'd kind of, in my own personal life, I'd experienced a relative suffering from dementia, and later in her life, she became, to all intents and purposes, she became zombified. She didn't know me or her family, and that's to me anyway, it's one of the most scariest things that could happen. This idea of losing yourself, who you are, and really it was to kind of approach it in the sense of what happens to the people around you when that's happening. On the one hand you've got Penny, who's very much she's a bit of a loner, but she sort of puts a happy smiley face on everything, even though deep down she's quite hurt by all these dodgy relationships she's had with blokes, and he's clearly finding it very difficult to find the decent man. And Harold, on the other hand, was always the loner who, was on his way out and kind of given up on life. And so it was really important to bring those two together, so that they could kind of aid each other in different ways. She becomes a stronger person, and Harold has some companionship, and that friendship is really key to the whole film. Well, we didn't have the luxury of a casting director or anyone like that, so we kind of did it ourselves. And actually, casting is one of the key parts of the process for me, because ultimately the two things that tell your story are the script and your cast, and if as long as you can get those two things right, then you're halfway there. So what we actually did was set up a open casting session. We put a call out on a local radio station up in Barnsley, and we just invited the general public down to come in one Saturday morning. I was there with a camcorder, and we just had, I think we probably had about 30 or 40 people coming through the door that day, all variety of people, people who just worked at the local shop, or people that maybe had done a bit of acting before. And really that process was always about trying to find people that were very close to characters already, because when you use non-actors, you don't really want them to be learning scripts, because that can become very stilted. What you really want is for them to be themselves. So we got a number of key cast from that casting session. Well, the original plan was actually to shoot in 5 days, believe it or not, which was a crazy idea. The main reason for trying to shoot so fast was purely down to budget restrictions. I'd kind of got it in my head that we could do it in 5 days. We actually shot the first shoot was 6 days, and then we did 3 days pickup, so it was about 9 days in total. And we shot an incredible amount of footage, And the reason that we were able to move so quickly is because we were shooting entirely handheld. We only lit maybe 4 scenes, so everything was natural light. There was no set building. We just used locations that we could find. And in fact, the Shuttleworth Institute, which appears in the film, is the house where the cast and crew lived for 6 days, which also helped because we could shoot in the house, around the house. We'd all eat and dine together, and that was really nice, like a family atmosphere. And it just meant that we could work really quickly. Well, the film combines documentary and drama, and quite early on I knew that I wanted to do that because we were shooting handheld, we were improvising, we were using natural light, so that all kind of pointed to this kind of documentary approach. But I didn't want to be stuck in documentary. I wanted to be able to go into a more sort of classic drama mode where there's music and some kind of more cinematic shots. So what I tried to do was make the first scene of the film go that whole arc of styles. So the first scene starts with a very long shot and ends with a very sort of fractured, hyper edited sequence, which is clearly more drama. And the idea there was trying to bed the audience into this idea of different styles throughout. And the whole film kind of does that. It starts off more drama, it starts off more documentary and goes more drama towards the end. Well, I'd already worked with Stan on a really short film that I made a few years before, which was all improvised. So when I started writing Harold, I started to think about who could play the part, and Stan came to mind. So we met up, discussed the project, and did a few little test shots and things like that. We had him I remember we had him walking stiffly up and down his road, around his garden, to the amusement of the neighbours. And so that all came together quite quickly. And it was a very challenging role, really, because it's quite a physical role, and with the kind of long days that we were doing, Stan really pulled it out of the bag, really. Sarah Spencer, who plays Penny, we met at a casting session. She came, and she was actually the first person to turn up one morning, and I remember filming her on the camcorder. We were just improvising a few scenes, and I remember when she finished, I looked over to Richard, the producer, and I was just like, "We've got Penny." She was amazing, and an incredibly natural performance. She loved improvisation, and was incredibly easy to direct. And I hope a star in the making, as far as I'm concerned.